We need to talk about the current state of the Elbaph arc, because we are now 21 chapters into our giant adventure, which is more than enough to form an opinion, and your opinions are quite different to what I expected. In terms of general Elbaphian sentiment, I took a poll of all of you wondrous people, and the vast majority of you currently feel like the Elbaph arc is pretty good. That's the 60% opinion, whilst almost 35% are in love with the arc at really good, and a combined 6% aren't quite feeling it. Those lower percentages are about standard. I take these sorts of polls a lot because it's my favorite feature of YouTube. I love knowing how you guys feel en masse about certain things. And the negative numbers aren't surprising. When I did the Gear 5th poll, the people feeling negative about that were about the same, 6-7%. However, it's the positive numbers in this poll that are quite unusual for One Piece. Whenever I've done these in the past for Egghead and Wano, the most positive opinion has always been the majority response. So the fact that we are sitting so firmly in the realm of just, pretty good, does demonstrate to me that Elbaph hasn't quite captured people in the same way as previous arcs have. There has been what I would describe as a mild dip in interest, or maybe not interest, maybe the more accurate word is investment. And I feel like most One Piece YouTubers can agree with that. The reason for that being is because during this period, views have been falling across the board for One Piece YouTube channels, and part of that is going to be because the anime took a 6-month break, and so a lot of casual fans who only watched the anime ended up taking a break from the extended media. But I do also believe that part of that is this slight bump down in Elbaph investment. Because if you're going to go out of your way to watch a video on a thing, it's not going to be a thing that you feel neutral towards. You need some investment in that topic. However, to be clear, we still have approximately, and this is pretty stunning, but approximately 95% of people feeling that Elbaph is either pretty good or really good, which is a colossal positive. We're mostly enjoying our time on this island, just perhaps not as much as, say, other islands like Egghead. The general consensus seems to be best summarized by the following comment. I'm definitely enjoying this arc, but I can't stop thinking about how much fun Egghead was. And that's right, because Elbaph is a very standard One Piece arc compared to Egghead Island. Almost every One Piece arc starts off feeling a bit slow when reading week to week, because exploring the new and wacky island, it's fun and everything, but it does take a while to put all of these pieces together to build the story of the arc, with the exception of Egghead. Because as soon as we arrived, this was a matter of global urgency. There was Vegapunks, there was Bonnie, there was Cypherpole, there was an Emperor of the Sea. Stuff was going down. Oda did not restrain himself in any way. And by this point on Egghead Island, we'd also had quite a few cuts to the outside world with stuff like Shanks vs. Kid, Blackbeard vs. Law, Garp heading to Hachinosu, and Sabo returning from the Reverie. So much of that stuff happened weirdly early on during Egghead, and at times it felt almost like what the Straw Hats were doing was the side story. And Elbaph has none of that. We are purely focused on the island at the moment, so it is a bit like coming down from a high and resuming everyday life and letting an arc play out as most standard One Piece stories do. There are count 'em, three things that I think Elbaph has nailed, absolutely nailed, and have instantly become a part of essential and iconic One Piece history. But there's also two pretty big things that I think Elbaph has really fumbled so far, and also a series of elements that could go either way. Also, this video is sponsored by Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, where you, Commander, take on the role of recruiting and leading tactical dolls in 3D turn-based strategy missions to uncover a conspiracy lurking deep beneath the surface of this post-apocalyptic world. And mate, this sort of thing is straight up my alley. It scratches very specific 3D strategy RPG style itch I often get. With the T-Dolls being my favorite feature of the game, and they come in 2 rarities, 4 classes, and wield one of 7 different weapon types to give you incredible strategic variety on missions. And when not on missions, you have access to the refitting room and dormitory with incredibly high render quality thanks to PBR technology, where you can level up your dolls, change their outfits, and see them engaging in everyday peaceful, relaxing, non-combative activities. And you now have access to even more dolls, outfits, and weapons with the new Escape from Cyborg patch. The new doll Vector is a must-pull in this update. She's an instant favorite of mine, capable of superb hard-hitting burn damage with the elite weapon Banshee's Whisper, thanks to the highly customizable weapon system. Plus, you can complete achievements to get her Molotov Bunny outfit for free, and in her spare time, Vector seems to enjoy painting and solving Rubik's Cubes, which is just adorable. Also, you can get Vector's other new outfit with a brand new accessory function allowing you to decorate your T-Dolls further with rich accessories, all at a limited time discount until May 31st, 2005. Plus, there's lots of other amazing stuff in the limited time Escape from Cyborg event, such as a new outfit for Cole Fiend, the Parabellum sign-in event that grants phenomenal rewards for signing in for 7 days in a row, and generous rewards for commanders clearing event stages. So you can and should download Girls Frontline 2 Exilium through my link in the description or scan my QR code on screen to start building your own collection of wildly amazing tactical dolls. And don't forget to follow the Girls Frontline 2 official social media accounts for more benefit details. Genuinely fun game. I actually think I played a bit too much, so highly recommended, but for now it's back to you, me. But we are going to start with the amazing, and that takes us to Loki was such an unexpected find for me. I immediately fell in love with his design and charisma. He is this weird mix of Dofi and Luffy. Weird, expected, but quite endearing and unique combination of character traits. Can't wait to see his backstory with Harold, his abilities, and overall role in the story. That is a brilliant comment that mostly summarizes my feelings as well. I wasn't expecting too much from Loki based on his silhouette that we'd seen. In my mind, he was either going to be a Spandam or Orochi-style tricksy villain with minimal substance, or a more Momonosuke-like prince character that we needed to help. But Oda did what Oda do, and he put all of the aura made from last year's bountiful aura harvesting into this one single character. Because Loki, he's kind of everything right now. I definitely agree with the comment on his design, but it's not just a mix of Luffy and Doflamingo. No, there is also a distinct hint of Charlotte Katakuri incorporated in there, at least aesthetically. And you can tell that Mad, a story scientist at Shiro Oda, engineered Loki to be as cool and as intimidating as possible, but also with an element of likability. So he took a lot of traits from other characters and slapped them into this super character. Loki's introduction was definitely the first moment on Elbaph that really blew me away. The thing that made me sit up and go, all right, we've got something here, which I feel was very necessary after the adventures in Legoland. And at the moment, the best part of Loki for me is his potential. There's still a big question mark over whether he'll be an ally or an enemy, or maybe even a mix of both, but I don't particularly care either way, because both directions hold a pretty incredible amount of potential, and I am mentally salivating at the promise of seeing Loki in a full-scale fight, because you just know that he is going to absolutely eviscerate whoever's unlucky enough to go up against him first. Friend or foe, doesn't matter, you are getting thwacked with a hammer. Loki's been chained up for so long, and Oda will need to give him that kind of showcase for Loki to live up to the legend that's been created around him. And Loki is also very directly tied to pretty much every major plot line or point of intrigue on Elbaph. There's still the mystery of his devil fruit to solve, the legendary devil fruit, as well as the story of King Harold, the story of Harudin. Loki is integral to all of this, and without Loki, we pretty rapidly run out of questions to ask. And that's why I do also understand the sentiment that Elbaph is just pretty good at times, because there's a lot of chapters without Loki, and given that he is the key to almost every interesting plot point on the island, I guess it can feel a bit like we're not moving forward during certain weeks that are purely, say, Holy Night focused. Although I think that's just an even greater credit to the character that Oda's built. Loki commands such presence that we're left a bit Loki hungry whenever he's not in a chapter. But he's definitely not the only crowning element of Elbaph. The mural alone has propelled Elbaph into one of my favorite arcs. The mural, mate, the mural. That was the bombshell that this arc really needed. Loki, he was a great start, but this is the scale of lore drop that Egghead left us craving. And I know that I'm comparing Elbaph to Egghead a lot now that I'll probably continue to, but that's because Egghead Island set a certain standard. That was Oda's introduction to the final saga of One Piece. And it came with so many old world lore revelations that this is now the standard for all arcs going forward. However many of them there may be left, and there may not be all that many, but we are really amping up the history and coming close to legitimately solving these mysteries which have been set up for decades, which is why this mural was such a welcome and generous gift. Because it took something set up on Egghead and expanded it like a big bang, giving birth to a whole new universe that we were unaware of before. And now we have a full picture, albeit a very cryptic full picture, of not only the past but also potentially the future of One Piece. So we've got one amazingly cool and compelling character, as well as one mind-blowing lore drop. So my third highlight so far is a nice moment of emotion. My favorite was Robin cutting her hair to make it look like the first time we met her, and her meeting up with Soul was super touching. It's kind of funny because in recent chapter reviews I've been talking about Soul treating Robin like the little girl he met 22 years ago. But at the same time, Robin did go out of her way to look more familiar to him by reclaiming that old hairstyle. But the amount that I loved the reunion of Robin and Soul is something that really surprised me and did change my opinion somewhat on Fake Out deaths in One Piece, because this situation did show, at least to me, that they can be done well, and it's just that throughout the history of One Piece, they really haven't been before now. I have a whole video elsewhere on this channel if you're interested in that. It examines in a painful amount of detail why Saul worked and nothing else has, using fictional facts and fictional logic. But this is the sort of thing that I really wanted from Elbaph. Not necessarily this specific reunion, but Elbaph is something that we've been, theoretically, working towards ever since Little Garden, and it very much warrants these hard emotional payoffs as a reward for finally making it this far. And in the case of Robin, this is her reward for managing to survive the last 2 decades, dereshishing herself to this point of reunion. So it was really well done and extremely satisfying for me. As another positive, I'd also like to give an honorable shout out to Scopper Gaban. It's very nice to finally have him in the picture, although everything we've gotten to see of him so far is still a bit of a tease, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting into him a bit more in terms of both action and some Roger lore. But as mentioned before, there have also been a mighty 2 things that have been quite questionable for me. The first of which being, I really didn't like the very start with the kidnapping and Lego Castle, so I made a 3 months break. That's fair enough. I'm pretty sure that Oda also took some pretty big breaks around that time, so you're not alone. At the very least, during that time, we all took about a month's break. But I do agree that this was quite a weak start to an arc by One Piece standards. The Lego stuff was pretty wild at the time, although not intentionally, because this was the series of chapters that had me, and many others, convinced that something really sinister and tricksy was going on here, because of all of the art errors like Luffy's changing weapon, his vanishing straw hat, and all of the other stuff, which was revealed to just be an uncharacteristic amount of legitimate art errors that were not caught, which have all now been fixed in the volume release. It's crazy that it ever got to that stage to begin with though. But without all of that stuff to dive into, because those art errors were really our main focus of the Lego time, without all of that stuff, I get it. By One Piece arc standards, it was not a strong start. It was a cute little adventure in Legoland, but it did feel a bit more like the premise of a filler arc. And I think we now know why that is. We didn't know this at the time, but One Piece now has an official collaboration with Lego, which Oda himself said was a dream fulfilled for him, that he'd been asking for One Piece Lego ever since the anime first came out. So my guess is that this whole Legoland on Elbaph section was inspired by that deal, and that Elbaph would have opened a different way had it not existed, but it was Oda's desire to work with Lego that made him think, oh, can we fit this in somewhere? And so that led to the crew getting drunk on Green Ferry and then abducted and then Lego. That, or it was meant to be a straight up planned promotion of the One Piece Lego sets. Just that the timing was a bit off. Like when Eiichiro Oda stated that he ended Wano quickly in order to get Shanks to appear just in time for the release of Film Red as a bit of manga promotion. So the One Piece manga is unfortunately not immune from the story changing to fit auxiliary marketing needs. And while I have no proof that this is what happened with Lego, unlike what happened with Film Red, it does feel like a strong possibility. Either way, I really do wonder how Elbaph would have started if this collaboration had not existed. It probably would have felt a bit more natural and engaging, but then there's also this. I think the only questionable move Oda has made so far was introducing Shamrock just to remove him from the arc, but we'll have to wait and see. Yes, we will have to wait and see. Look, there's still potential. But as it is right now, I really kind of struggled to define Shamrock for the sake of this discussion. Because look, he is definitely a highlight. When he strolled in, it was like, whoa. But also, after he strolled right the F back out, he's become a bit of a low point for me. Introducing Figgle and Shamrock gave Elbaph that relentless egghead feeling, where we were being bombarded by massive world elements coming together to clash gloriously. And then removing him by sending Shamrock back to Marijois felt like abruptly hitting the brakes. It is the biggest narrative cock tease in One Piece history to have this man set foot on the island and then just Grandpa Simpson his way right back out again. So before I said that we were theoretically building to Elbaph ever since Little Garden, and the reason why I use the word theoretically is because Eiichiro Oda has come out and said that he wasn't originally planning on doing an Elbaph arc. And I know a lot of people don't believe me when I say this, but those are his words. I've got a video on it if you want to watch it. But the point of bringing this up is that it could explain Shamrock. that maybe the intention for Shamrock is to be explored later down the line, but this somewhat improvised Elbaph arc needed an extra jolt of excitement, and so we got a taste of him here. And now Shamrock has left the other Holy Knights with the impossible task of living up to him. With that said, again, it may still be too early to judge this, and Shamrock may become involved in Elbaph again, but right now, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the Shamrock tease, especially because it has put so much heavy lifting onto the poor shoulders of the rest of the Holy Knights. I'm still not sold on the villains yet. The Holy Knights feel like much less of a threat after just coming off the 5 elders on Egghead. So I am personally slowly coming around to the Holy Knights, but I definitely share the same concern. It's really hard to take them seriously as the main antagonists after just having fought against the 5 elders. It definitely feels like a step down in the hierarchy, which it is, and that's why I'm hoping that these Holy Knights are just an Elbaphian entree, sort of like how Rob Lucci and the Seraphim were our opening shot of Egghead. Just a bit of fun opening to mid-level action before the truly serious stuff kicks in, because each of the 3 Holy Knights left on Elbaph have a lot of potential to be fun side characters. The 3 of them would all work quite well as accessories for a more serious antagonist. For example, I'm really enjoying the theme of Saint Summers with his focus on exploring love in its most tragic forms, but I'm not sure if he's equipped to take on the role of primary antagonist at this stage in One Piece. We are just too deep into this series, too deep into this world to have this guy be a whole crew problem. Not just a whole crew problem, a whole island problem. Which is why I'm still holding out hope that Loki, Shamrock, or maybe even someone else is gonna step in and take control. But we'll have to wait and see. That's up in the air right now. And the second thing that could go either way is, I'm disappointed that Usopp hasn't had his character building moment, but I guess there's still time. There's definitely still time. We're quite early on in Elbaph, so I wouldn't have expected Usopp to have his moment by now, if it is gonna happen, because I'm not sure how much of this is just headcanon from, quite frankly, people like me. But at the same time, Elbaph is much more important to Usopp than any other member of the crew, even Robin. Elbaph ended up being important to her more or less incidentally, because that's where all her books and Giant went. So if we do leave without Usopp doing something or gaining something from the island, then that would be a shame. But again, it is way too early to be judging that sort of thing. I'm not sure if that moment's gonna come. However, to be completely fair to Usopp, I never would have thought that this arc was going to have as much Brook focus as we've had, and that's only really become a thing in the past couple of chapters. We're still very much in that introductory period and still establishing what the story threads are, so there's still room for Usopp here to develop a little something. Although Elbaph is a little bit more difficult to pinpoint in terms of exactly where we are in the One Piece arc life cycle. We're currently 21 chapters in, meaning that we've confirmed that this is not a small Zou-length arc, because that was only 23 chapters and it was pretty much wrapped up by now, which leaves us with 2 options. Elbaph is either going to be a mid-range classic One Piece arc, or it's going to be a mega arc. Mid-range stuff is along the lines of Fishman Island and Punk Hazard, which both sat at about the 50 chapter mark, and at this point in both of those arcs, we were sitting in the turn, which is a point in the fun adventure where we take a dark turn. After which point the crew regroup for a final victorious assault. That point in Fishman Island was Otohime and Fisher Tiger's flashback, and on Punk Hazard it was after Luffy lost to Caesar and they were imprisoned, both of which were happening at about this point. I would say that reaching that point on Elbaph is probably going to be the Loki flashback to create that dramatic crater that we need to rise up and conquer, but I honestly don't know how close we are to that yet. I just know that we're not quite there, so Elbaph is currently on a slower pace than Fishman Island and Punk Hazard, and I'd say it's currently more on pace with Egghead and Whole Cake Island sized arcs, which were 68 and 78 chapters respectively, and at this point in Whole Cake Island we were still handling those introductory elements. So Elbaph lines up with that, and Egghead, it's a bit of a weird one, because 21 chapters in we were at the turn, sort of. At this point York had just been revealed at the trader, the Seraphim had all turned on us, and we were at our lowest. However, it was also at this point that Oda decided to change the traditional arc structure, skipping all of that, and he did a different story instead, which reset the arc structure and moved the position of the turn to become Kuma's flashback later on. The only thing I can say right now is that I don't feel like Elbaph is going to be Wano or Dressrosa length. By this point in both of those arcs, we'd barely gotten anywhere. Act 1 of Wano had just finished, and Dressrosa, we were still mucking around in the Colosseum. So going by past standards, I'd say that we're a third or a quarter of the way through Elbaph, unless Oda decides to pull another Egghead Island and suddenly throw us all onto Marie-Joie through a funky abyss circle or something, but my favorite piece of Elbaph feedback is the following. This is the first arc I've been reading from the start, and I love it. And I'm glad you love it. But here is something absolutely wild. I've been running this channel for about 10 years now, and Elbaph is only the third arc that it will be covering from beginning to end. I started in early Whole Cake Island, and then Wano took up most of this channel's life with over 4 years of publication, and even Egghead took 2 and a bit years. So with all of the everything it is I've just said, I'm definitely still loving Elbaph, and I'm looking forward to covering it for however long Eiichiro Oda chooses to bless us with it. But you let me know what you feel about Elbaph in the comments below.